Imagine a time, in the early 19th century, when the very foundations of southern Africa were shaken to their core. This period of intense turmoil, warfare, and migration is known by two powerful names: Mfecane, a Zulu word meaning the crushing, and Difaqane, a Sotho-Swana term for the scattering. For decades, this era reshaped societies, redrew borders, and left a legacy that is still visible today. But what exactly caused this massive upheaval? Let us journey back to understand the forces that ignited one of the most transformative periods in African history. The story begins not with a battle, but with the environment itself. From around 1790 to 1820, southern Africa was gripped by what historians call the Great Drought. This wasn't just a few dry years, it was a prolonged period of ecological crisis. Rains failed, rivers ran dry, and grazing lands turned to dust. For the numerous clans and chiefdoms whose entire existence depended on cattle and crops, this was a catastrophe. Famine became a constant threat, and competition for dwindling resources like water and fertile land grew fiercely intense. As if the environmental pressures weren't enough, new economic forces were at play. On the coast, at Delagoa Bay, trade with European merchants, particularly the Portuguese, was booming. The most valuable commodities? Ivory and, tragically, enslaved people. This new trade created a powerful incentive for local leaders to consolidate power. To control the trade routes and supply the goods, you needed a strong, centralized state and a formidable army. Small, independent chiefdoms were suddenly at a disadvantage. The pressure was on to either expand and dominate, or be dominated. This combination of environmental hardship and economic competition created a volatile powder keg, and all it needed was a spark. That spark came in the form of a brilliant, ruthless, and revolutionary military leader, Shaka Zulu. Shaka ascended to the leadership of the small Zulu clan around 1816 and immediately began to transform it. He wasn't just a warrior, he was an innovator. He discarded the traditional long throwing spear, which was used once and then lost, and introduced a new weapon, the short, broad-bladed stabbing spear known as the *iklastar. The name itself is said to imitate the sound it made as it was withdrawn from an enemy. This weapon forced a brutal, new kind of close-quarters combat. But the *ikla* was just one part of his revolution. Shaka reorganized the entire Zulu army, creating highly disciplined regiments, or *amabutho*, based on age. These warriors were professional soldiers, living in dedicated military kraals and forbidden to marry until their service was complete. He developed the famous buffalo horns formation, a tactical masterpiece. The main force, the chest, would engage the enemy head-on. Meanwhile, the horns, two flanking groups, would encircle and annihilate them. The loins, a reserve force, would be held back to either reinforce the main attack or pursue fleeing survivors. Under Shaka's command, the Zulu army became an unstoppable force. The Zulu kingdom began to expand rapidly, conquering and absorbing neighboring clans. This was the crushing in action. Those who resisted were often utterly destroyed, their villages burned, their cattle seized, and their people incorporated into the growing Zulu state or forced to flee for their lives. Shaka's expansion sent shockwaves across the entire region, triggering the scattering, or Difaqane. Entire communities were uprooted, setting off a domino effect of migration and conflict. Imagine waves of displaced people, desperate and starving, moving across the landscape. One of the most significant groups were the Ndebele, led by one of Shaka's own formidable commanders, Mfecane. After a falling out with Shaka, Mfecane led his people on an epic migration north. They carved out a new kingdom for themselves in what is now Zimbabwe, conquering and absorbing local Shona communities along the way. Another group, the Ngoni, fled even further. Led by Zwangendaba, they crossed the Zambezi River, a feat so legendary it was said they parted the waters, and journeyed as far north as modern-day Tanzania and Malawi, creating new states and disrupting existing societies for thousands of miles. Back in the south, fragmented groups fleeing the chaos coalesced into a new identity known as the Mfengu, or Fingo, meaning wanderers seeking service. They eventually settled in the Eastern Cape, becoming allies of the British and playing a complex role in the region's future. The Difaqane was a chaotic whirlwind of movement, a desperate scramble for survival that left no part of southern Africa untouched. But this era wasn't just about destruction and flight. It was also a time of remarkable resilience and state building. Amid the chaos, some leaders chose a different path from pure conquest. The most brilliant of these was Moshoeshoe I. He was a master diplomat, not just a warrior. He understood that in this dangerous new world, strength came from unity and strategic defense. He gathered various Sotho-speaking clans and refugees and led them to a nearly impregnable mountain fortress called Thaba Bosiu, the Mountain of Night. From this stronghold, he built a new nation, the Basotho. Moshoeshoe skillfully played his rivals against each other. He would offer tribute to powerful neighbors like the Zulu, grant asylum to refugees to increase his own numbers, and acquire guns and horses to modernize his defenses. His diplomacy and foresight allowed his people to not only survive the Mfecane but to forge a kingdom that endures to this day as the nation of Lesotho. Similarly, in the north, the Swazi kingdom, under leaders like Sobhuza I, also consolidated its power. By strategically navigating the dangers posed by their powerful neighbors and incorporating refugee groups, they built a stable and resilient state that would become modern-day Eswatini. These stories show that amidst the crushing and scattering, there was also incredible innovation, adaptation, and the birth of new nations. Just as the chaos of the Mfecane seemed to be reaching its peak, a new force entered the picture, complicating everything. These were European settlers moving inland from the Cape Colony. Starting in the 1830s, thousands of Boers, descendants of Dutch settlers, embarked on what they called the Great Trek. They were seeking to escape British rule at the Cape and find new land for themselves in the interior. They arrived in a landscape that had been depopulated and reconfigured by the Mfecane. They saw vast, seemingly empty lands, not fully understanding the complex history of displacement that had just occurred. This led to inevitable and violent clashes. The Boers, with their firearms and organized wagon lagers, clashed with the Ndebele under Mzilikazi, eventually driving them north across the Limpopo River. They also came into conflict with the powerful Zulu kingdom, leading to famous and brutal battles like the Battle of Blood River in 1838. The arrival of the Boers, followed by the British who were expanding their own colonial influence, added a whole new dimension to the power struggles of the region. The Mfecane, in a way, cleared a path that European encroachment would follow, but it also created powerful African states like the Zulu, Basotho, and Swazi, who would fiercely resist colonial domination for decades to come. So, what is the ultimate legacy of the Mfecane? It was nothing less than a complete demographic and political transformation of southern Africa. Before this period, the region was a mosaic of hundreds of small-scale, decentralized chiefdoms. After the Mfecane, it was a landscape of larger, more centralized, and militarized African states. Old ethnic identities were shattered, and new ones were forged in the crucible of war and migration. The movement of people was immense, creating new population centers and leaving other areas depopulated, which had profound consequences when European settlers arrived. The political map of modern southern Africa, the existence of Lesotho and Eswatini, the distribution of the Ndebele people in Zimbabwe, the strong regional identity of KwaZulu-Natal, all of these can be traced directly back to this tumultuous period. The Mfecane was a time of immense suffering and violence, but also of incredible resilience, innovation, and the birth of nations. It remains one of the most important, complex, and debated chapters in African history, a powerful reminder of how societies can be broken and rebuilt in the face of crisis. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into the history of the Mfecane fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what other historical events you'd like to see covered. Until next time.